we're now on to the last 3. Story time, I call this one. And I'm going to make them brief because I think we've been going on for far too long and I desperately need a drink. So Steve Woman, thank you very much for your question. You asked quite a nice one. My question is, where did your interest start with model making and prop building, and what was your first professional commission? I'm going to answer this very quick, actually. It started all because of my dad back in 1980 or 81, episode 1 of Legopolis. I was sat there with my brother, my dad and my mum, and it was the scene set on the Barnet bypass where the Doctor would go into the TARDIS and then you'd see the console room. And I just said to my dad, how do they make the TARDIS big on the inside? And he said, well, that's because the thing you see on the outside, the police box, is just a prop, it's just a box. And when they go inside, they cut to a studio. Now, in the studio, the way my dad described it was, they've got the console and they just shove it up against the wall. So because of that framing of that particular statement, I assumed that all BBC TV studios had roundels on the wall and that they just used that and then shoved this console up against it. So it highlighted to me the idea that film and television obviously isn't real. It's made. So it got me interested in the idea, well, if that's not real, what else isn't real? And I started counting cameras. I started becoming aware that there, in some cases it might be one camera filming, multiple takes of the same scene, and in others it would be several different cameras filming one scene. I got really intrigued by that. But of course, because I was also slightly creative in terms of I used to draw a lot and make things. My dad used to build a lot of stuff as well. I wanted everything. I wanted to film things. I wanted to write stories, but I also wanted to build the props as well. So my dad would encourage me in that regard. So that's how that started. It was just basically all down to my dad, really, because he put this idea, the idea of you start with nothing, create an idea, and then from that you've got lots and lots of different disciplines where loads of people come together with various different artistic bents to create something that the end audience can sit there and watch. And all of that was a team effort to create something to entertain, and that's where all that came from. It came from my dad destroying the illusion of the TARDIS for me. So thanks very much, Dad. But I do appreciate it, and I really do appreciate the support that my parents gave me over those years. So thank you very much for that, Stephen, or Steve. Nathan Alexander, you ask, have you ever met the man himself, Tom Baker? What's the story behind it, and have you ever met any of the others? Yes, I have met Tom Baker. Late 90s, there's not much to tell. I used to be semi-friendly with a guy called Steve Schussman. He later calls himself Steve Scott, but he ran, I think he might still even run, I don't know, the Stamford Centre and the Strand. I think he called himself Sci-Fi Collector at one point. Tom Baker was going to be there at the very first signing, so I said, oh, look, Tom Baker's my favourite Doctor, can I come up and have a look? And, meet him? He said, yeah, sure. So I went up there with my mate Stephen, and we spent the day with Tom. To be honest, again, not much to report. Took some artwork, and Tom really enjoyed it. We sort of spoke about the fact I'd written to him as a kid, that I'd written to Jimmy Savile. Yeah, Jimmy Savile. About meeting him, and I never had a response back, and it upset me as a kid. I mean, I was only 4 at the time, and so we had a laugh about that. So there's not much I can really tell you. Just spend the day, mainly watching Tom sign other people's autographs, and in between that, we had conversations with him. So there's really not much to say about that. Nothing. Yeah, it was just a meeting. I mean, to be honest, I'm not really into meeting people, but occasionally it happens. Have I met any of the others? Let's just answer Doctors. Yes, I met John Pertwee in 1996. Sounds a bit mean, but we were just filming a Doctor Who film for college. Me, my friend Carl and Stephen. There are others as well, but they're pertinent to this story. And one day I saw an advert for a one-man show from John Pertwee coming to the Isle of Wight, where, literally in the theatre just opposite my house. And I turned to my mate Carl and said, we ought to go and see him because he'll cark it soon. Because I've got a bit of a thing I can sort of predict when people are dying. That's why I don't ever try and predict when Tom's going to go. I actively avoid talking about that. But also, around the time that John was due to arrive was my mate Stephen's birthday. and I thought it'd be a great idea to surprise Stephen with that. So I wrote to John and explained the situation, explained that we'd just filmed this Doctor Who film for college, that my mate's birthday is coming up, and we want to sort of make him think we're coming to do some more filming, but really we want him to meet John. And John kindly wrote back and said, yeah, he was up for that. So the day came, the show wasn't until the evening, so I went and spent the day with John and his agent, whose name I can't remember. John was really nice. We talked about everything and anything. You know, John's career, motorbikes, gadgets, film and television making. Of course, that then lent itself to, you know, my Doctor Who film that I was doing, and he asked me why I was doing it. And I explained that I was supposed to have been doing a different film for college, and because of some bad weather that literally destroyed our locations, I ended up doing a Doctor Who film, and that one fell through, and then we ended up doing another Doctor Who film just off the cuff. And I really didn't want to talk too much about it because it was about a fourth Doctor meeting a future incarnation, and John was really interested in this, and he asked me all sorts of questions, and he talked about this other film that he'd just been involved with. I think it was down in Worthing. You'll probably know it's a film called Devious, and he said he'd enjoyed doing that. And he asked me if, when he comes back from America, because he was going to go over to the States, whether he could come back and shoot some stuff for me. And that made me panic because the film was pretty much finished, but John Pertwee had just offered to bring the third Doctor into our movie, and I hadn't prepared for that, and I couldn't see any way of, you know, bringing that in. So I was slightly panicking, but I just said to him, yeah, that'd be really good, thanks very much. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. I mean, ultimately, after, you know, the story that I'm about to tell you, I did come up with a plan, and the idea that I had was for John to top and tail this story. I thought that it would be some version of his Doctor being taken out of time. He arrives in some mysterious house and meets another Time Lord and starts remembering the future, so he will then tell our story. Now, there were several scenes in our film, which was 25 minutes long, that I cut out because of either timing reasons or we couldn't afford it, or, you know, it just wasn't possible to do. And I thought John could fill in those gaps and then sort of frame the entire story. And the guy he was going to talk to was going to be another Time Lord played by a friend of mine called Michael Sheard, who you may know. He played Mr. Bronson in a programme called Grange Hill, but he was also the headmaster in Remembrance of the Daleks. But alas, it didn't happen, and you'll find out in a minute why. So anyway, after my day with him, it was time to go and pick up Stephen and Carl. So we picked up Stephen. The way we framed this meeting with John was actually we're going to see the owner of the theatre because we needed to do some model filming. And we wanted to sort of discuss with him how we were going to film this model sequence. So we trotted in, making sure Stephen didn't see any of the John Pertwee posters. We went down to John's dressing room, and thankfully John played along because he knew Stephen was coming. So John was sat opposite the door at a desk, and he had his back to us. So we went in and we sort of shook hands with the guy we were pretending was the theatre manager, and I made sure that Stephen, my mate, whose birthday it was, had a direct line of sight on John. But of course, he wasn't expecting John to be there. And without turning around, John said, Stephen, so glad you could join us. And he turned round and beamed at Stephen. When Stephen clocked sight of John, his jaw dropped and the blood just drained from his face. And John said, oh my God, I think you're going to keel over. Do you want a seat? So we sat down, and, you know, Stephen was beside himself with shock and awe. And John very kindly signed some stuff for my mate Carl and for Stephen, and we got talking. He said, we heard about the film, and we're talking about the film and how he was sort of interested in doing it, and that was all very well and good. And so anyway, after doing all that, we went off and sat down in the theatre in our seats, and it was embarrassing. There were only about 10 people in the theatre. Now this theatre could hold about 2,000 people. And John came on, and you saw his face when he saw that, it was just basically my group and another group of people who I also happen to know. and he was doing his bits and he was trying to interact with us and we were doing our best, but he wanted us to sing along with some songs and we just didn't know these songs. They were proper old school vaudeville songs that we had never heard of. So he was going, sing along now, and we couldn't because we didn't know what he was doing. Anyway, when the intermission came, I went down and saw him and he was seething. I said, I'm so sorry, John. It's just just the way it is. They didn't advertise this very well. But the show had to go on, and it did. But we did a bit of a meet and greet, so I brought the other group down. Now, within that group is a guy that you may or may not know. His name's Alistair Pearson. He used to do all the book covers, and I've known him since the early 80s. He's a family friend of mine. And with him were a couple of other people I did know and one or two people I didn't know. Now, John Pertwee was there signing autographs for these guys, and me and my mates, Colin and Stephen, were at the back of the room just sort of observing. Now, John did something next that really pissed me off. And I can't blame him for it because the conversation, you know how conversations go in ebbs and flows. The conversation died back a little bit. So like the true showman, to keep the conversation flowing, he said to the other group, "Are you part of this film?" And Alistair said no, because he and the others didn't know about it. So John then looked at me and said, "Oh, what's this film of yours? Tell me all about it." And I was seething because I didn't want the other guys to know. And I know why John did it, and I don't hold it against him, but I was absolutely bloody seething. I did not want to talk about it in front of those guys. I didn't want them to know about it. The film wasn't ready. It was never going to be shown to anyone other than my lecturers, and I did not want them to know about it. But John kept pushing it as if he didn't know about it. Now, we'd had an all-day conversation just between him and me, and then another conversation about it between me, Stephen and Carl. So John knew damn well all about this film, but he pretended like he'd never heard of it in this final meeting. And I just did not know how to respond. So that put me really on the spot. But there we are. Anyway, I didn't hold against John. Other doctors that I've met, yes, I've met Peter Davison. Again on the Isle of Wight. It was at a round table charity event. This was during Peter's period where he was very much anti-Doctor Who. He used to slag it off and call it crap. And he would go on camera and do interviews where he'd just slag it off completely. And we sat there waiting for Peter to arrive, and I had my grey Renegade Dalek with me. It was in the corner. And Peter walked in with a smile on his face. As soon as he clocked the Dalek, he went, "Oh, well, here we go, we've arrived. Bloody Doctor Who." And his attitude stunk. But we tried not to say anything, and he came over and, I presented him with the Doctor Who book, and he had a few choice words about Doctor Who, and he very kindly signed the 1980s book by David J. Howe and whoever. But his attitude was just awful. He just came across as a right prick. And after about half an hour, I got so hacked off with it, I just left. I couldn't be dealing with his attitude. I just thought, what a prick you are. Thankfully, in the last decade, Peter has sort of reined it in, and he's actually been very positive and very enthusiastic about his time on Doctor Who, so very funny. And, I really like Peter now, but in that one moment and in that little period, he was an arsehole. But I'm happy to say that he's gone very much up in my estimation. Moving on to Colin Baker, I've met him. I've known him, not personally, but we've met a few times. I've known him since 84, 85. In fact, it was him and his wife. In fact, I've spoken more to his wife in recent years than I have to him. When we moved to where we live now, they gave us some advice because they live just across the way from us. I occasionally see him in town, but not that often. But like with all these people, I tend to keep my distance. I don't want to come across as a fanboy, so I keep a respectful distance, even to the behind the scenes personnel. I met Sylvester McCoy. That's a bit of a weird one because I actually directed him in a short film, about a 25-minute long film, back in 2005. The weird thing about it is I don't remember it very much. I know I've been socialising with him, went to the bar a few times with him. I don't drink, unfortunately. I had Coke and he had something red in a small glass. I guess it was a small wine. But my wife recently said to me, "Oh, do you remember when we went out for a meal with him?" And I don't remember it at all. Well, no, I at the time I completely forgot about it. But the more I thought about it, I do remember the odd snippet. But you'd think I'd remember that, but I don't. You know, lovely man. He did what we asked of him for the filming that we did at that point, and yeah, absolutely delightful to work with, very pleasant. In terms of any of the Doctors beyond that, no, I've not met McGann. I've not met any of the new series Doctors other than Peter Capaldi, and I went up there because they were filming at my friend's house again, and my kids had just seen Paddington, so they wanted to go and see him, but they couldn't because they had school. So I drew out this little card of Paddington Bear holding a sonic screwdriver, and I made Peter a duplicate of the original Sylvester McCoy TARDIS Dorky, because I knew he liked collecting things. So I went up to see him, and it was a bit embarrassing, really. They were filming his second series. Now, I hadn't seen his first series, and I ended up not seeing his second series, and I only saw bits of his third series. So I was hoping he wouldn't ask me questions about whether I was enjoying the show or not, because I hadn't seen it. My kids had seen a couple, but it was on too late for them. I was mainly there because of the Paddington Bear connection. So I waited for Peter to turn up, and I was just daydreaming looking at the floor when suddenly I saw this pair of boots walk in. And I looked at the boots and thought, they're a bit like my boots, because I wear steel toe caps. And then I looked up a bit more and I saw these checkered trousers, and I thought, I like those trousers, that's the sort of trousers I'd wear. And as I went up, I got to his knees and I saw this coat hanging down. I said, he wears a black coat like I do. I looked up a bit further and I saw he was wearing a grey hoodie, just like I was wearing a grey hoodie, because I've worn this for years. And then I looked up and looked at his face, it's bloody Peter Capaldi. And my first thought was, shit, he's wearing pretty much what I'm wearing. Now, I immediately started thinking, what if the crew, I've been wandering around like this all bloody day. What if the crew thought I was cosplaying the Doctor? I wasn't cosplaying the Doctor. I've worn pretty much the same clothes since the early 90s. So, in conversation with Peter, I quickly whisked off my my hoodie. But by that point, it's too late. Everyone was calling us the Capaldi twins. So anyway, I talked to him, and he's really nice to talk to, really pleasant. We talked about everything, including his love for the show. And of course, I asked the obvious. I said, so bearing in mind that you wanted to play this for as long as you can remember, are you going to try and outdo Tom? And he said to me, I'm going to try my level best. He would love to stay on and outdo Tom. Now, I'm not going to say anything more than this, other than he didn't outdo Tom. And I've heard interviews with him after he left the show. Put it this way, what he was saying there is not what he was saying to me about a year beforehand. As far as he was concerned, when he was telling me he was in for the long haul to outdo Tom, because he really wanted to try and do that. At least 5 years was what he said, but he wanted to try and outdo Tom. So read into that what you want. So that's the end of that. Yes, I have met other people. I bet other people beyond that, but yeah. That's an interesting place to stop.